Mom died giving birth when I was 7. I remember standing over her fresh grave, holding my newborn sister in my arms. It was November, cold and miserable, with snow and rain mixing together. I kept thinking how cold and lonely Mom must be down there. I looked at my sister's wrinkly, pink little face and thought, why did God take Mom? Why not her instead? In that moment, I hated that tiny, squirming bundle. I didn't care that she was my sister. I wanted to just drop her in the mud and run. Run far, far away, somewhere special, somewhere I could feel loved again. Then, a snowflake landed on her little nose. She sneezed, blinked up at me, and smiled. The sweetest, tiniest smile. And suddenly my chest ached with something warm and soft. I realized I didn't need to run. I was already in that special place. 10 years passed, and Lucy and I never left each other's side. Our dad was the keeper of an old lighthouse, so we lived far from everything. No school, just homeschooling. We'd go months without seeing another soul, except when tourists showed up in the summer, wanting to gawk at the lighthouse. Dad always said we didn't need people. Just have faith. Just pray. So, we prayed. But mostly we ran wild along the shore, hunting for sea glass or fossils. Lucy dreamed of finding a message in a bottle, so we checked the beach every single day. I was getting too old for those kinds of games, but I loved seeing her face light up whenever we found something. That day, we were back at the beach. The wind was soft and seagulls were screaming somewhere far off. I stood staring at the horizon. Somewhere out there was the whole wide world. In 6 months, I'd turn 18. I'd be leaving for the city, for college. But what about Lucy? What would happen to her here, all alone?
Come quick! I found something.
Lucy's voice, sharp and excited. I ran over and found her crouched by a soggy wooden crate.
I opened the lid and look!
Her voice was shaking. Inside, 3 little bundles, 2 black, 1 ginger.
They're puppies.
Lucy whispered. Her eyes were wide with hope.
They're just sleeping, right?
I swallowed hard, picked up the first pup. So cold, so still. I pressed a finger to its tiny chest. Nothing. No, Lucy, I said softly. Her eyes filled with tears.
Try the other one,
she begged. The second was the same, lifeless and cold. Lucy, I said, my voice tight. I'm sorry. Someone threw them into the sea to get rid of them. They didn't stand a chance. Let's just go home.
No,
she yelled, her eyes blazing.
You don't get it. We can't just leave them.
She grabbed the ginger pup, the smallest, cradling it to her ear. Her voice shot out, shaking with something wild and desperate.
I hear him. He's breathing.
Lucy, it's just your imagination.
No, he's alive.
And she started working, rubbing his tiny body, breathing warm air against his fur, whispering,
Come on. You got this.
Time stretched forever. Then, the softest, weakest little peep. Lucy gasped, her face breaking into pure joy.
I told you, he's alive. You didn't believe me.
We buried the other 2 pups together. Lucy covered their tiny graves with flowers. All the while, the little ginger pup slept against her chest, tucked under her jacket. On the way home, Lucy couldn't stop talking. How she'd name him this or that, how they'd be best friends. And me? I kept my mouth shut. I knew Dad wasn't going to be happy. Dad was chopping wood when we reached the house. A tall, weathered man, face like cracked leather, voice rough as the wind. I was scared of him. Not because he ever hit me. He never did. But because of the way he looked at me, like I was a problem he didn't know how to solve. He heard our steps, stopped, and turned. His eyes landed on Lucy, and the bundle in her jacket.
Daddy,
Lucy's voice was bright, fearless.
we found a puppy. Somebody tried to drown him, but we saved him. Look.
She pulled her jacket open. The little pup barely stirred. Dad's face stayed cold.
We don't need a dog.
He said flatly and turned back to his work. Chop. Crack. I saw Lucy's lip tremble, but her eyes, no tears, just something fierce and stubborn. She clutched the pup tighter and stepped forward.
That's not fair.
Her voice cracked the air, raw and sharp. Dad turned. His gaze, heavy, hard. But Lucy didn't flinch.
You always say God has a plan for everyone.
She shot at him, her voice trembling but strong.
Mom died because God wanted her to, and I'm here, alive, because God has a plan for me. And you know what?
She lifted the tiny pup higher.
This is his plan. I'm supposed to save this puppy.
Dad stared down at her. His eyes, so cold, so distant. Then, without a word, he stepped closer, looked hard at the pup, and said gruffly,
You'll care for it yourself. The dog's weak. Probably won't last the week. When it dies, I don't want to hear crying.
Lucy's face lit up.
I promise,
she said, beaming. She darted forward and kissed him, quick and loud on his scratchy cheek. And for one split second, I swear. Dad smiled. The pup didn't die. We named him Rusty. Rusty grew fast, strong and golden with a thick, glossy coat. Within months, he was a gorgeous, proud young dog. And he and Lucy? Inseparable. They did everything together, played outside, watched TV side by side, slept curled up, Lucy in bed, Rusty underneath. They even ate together, Lucy at the table, Rusty under it. And me? I saw them playing through the window and felt peace. I thought, when I leave, Lucy won't be alone. She'll have Rusty. How wrong I was. It started a month before I was supposed to leave for the city. Rusty changed, stopped eating, stuck close to Lucy, licking her hands. His fur lost its shine, falling out in clumps. Before long, Lucy got sick too. Pale, weak, barely able to stroke Rusty's head as he lay beside her. Bleeding sores covered his body. And then hers. Her soft, broken moans ripped my heart apart. Dad, we need a hospital. Please, at least for Lucy. I begged.
It's God's will.
He snapped.
Your mother died in the hospital. You want that for Lucy, too?
I prayed, but heaven stayed silent. Lucy was fading. Her skin yellow, eyes sunken like black pits. Rusty withered, too. One night, checking on her, I found Lucy asleep. Rusty curled at her feet. The room reeked of rot. I turned to the window, when suddenly Lucy's cold fingers clutched my wrist.
Rusty, he's trying.
She gasped, coughing hard. Thick black blood poured from her mouth. I tried to turn Lucy's head so she wouldn't choke. But suddenly Rusty jumped up, growling like he was ready to tear me apart. I jerked back. He looked rabid, his eyes burning with some hellish fire. His fur was gone in patches, ribs poking through, covered in nasty, oozing sores. Thick, slimy drool dripped from his mouth. And then, out of nowhere, he lunged at Lucy's face, slurping up the black blood like he was starving for it. Dad! I screamed. Dad barely glanced at me, grabbed the shotgun, and we bolted to Lucy's room. What we saw, I still can't explain. Lucy was on her back, mouth wide open, and over her, Rusty. His front paws pressed into her chest, and from her mouth, a bright green light poured out. Rusty was sucking it in, his breaths loud, rushed, desperate.
It's the damn devil.
Dad roared.
He's stealing her life.
And he fired a shot into the ceiling. Rusty froze. His head snapped toward us, and in a blink, he charged straight at Dad. They hit the floor, thrashing, rolling. The dog we once loved, now a monster, sank his teeth deep into Dad's arm. Dad let out a raw, guttural growl of pain, but didn't let the beast tear him apart. His fist crashed into Rusty's ribs, hard. The dog yelped, but his jaws only clamped down tighter. I heard a sickening crunch. Blood burst from the wound, soaking Rusty's fur and pooling on the floor. Dad gasped, face twisted in agony, but he kept fighting. My eyes darted around. There, an old coal sack in the corner. "Here, take this," I screamed, rushing forward. With one last burst of strength, Dad grabbed a fistful of the blood-slick fur and slammed Rusty's face to the floor. The monster thrashed wildly, claws tearing deep gouges into the wooden boards, breathing in ugly, wet, bubbling gasps. I hurled the sack over the beast, yanked the rope tight. A howl ripped from inside. Inhuman, layered, like a whole chorus of voices screaming at once. The sack bucked and writhed, fighting like hell to get free.
Hurry!
Dad choked, his hand pressed hard against his torn arm. Blood poured through his fingers. I pulled the rope with all my strength. The muffled screech inside cracked, broke, into a gurgling, ragged wheeze. "Rusty," I whispered, my voice shaking. Dad, pale and dripping sweat, gave a slow, grim nod.
Yeah, that's him.
His voice rasped, thick with pain.
My grandma told me about these things. They call it the hunger maw. Pretends to be a dog. Then it feeds, sucks the life out of its owner. It's sick, and it tries to dump its curse on someone else. If the host survives, the beast dies. The damn thing came here, the day you found him.
Silence. Only our ragged breaths and the faint squirming from the sack. Then, Dad staggered, clutching the sack tight, and turned toward the door.
No time.
He muttered.
I'll finish it.
I ran to Lucy. Her chest barely moved, every breath rattling, wet and broken. "Come on, Dad," I thought, my heart pounding. "Hurry, please, hurry." I flew to the window. My nails dug into the sill as I watched. Dad stood at the cliff's edge. The waves roared below, crashing, hungry, with a raw, shaking cry. He swung back and hurled the sack into the sea. It's over. Lucy's safe. She has to be, but... A scream. Short. Sharp. And so full of agony it shattered the world around me. I spun. Lucy. Her frail body sprawled on the bed, eyes wide, too wide, frozen in terror. Her lips twisted, her chest still. No breath. Lucy was gone. We buried her. I couldn't stay. That house, everything was a graveyard of memories. I left. I ran. And I didn't come back. A year later, I finally decided to visit Dad. Spring. Blossoms whispered in the breeze. The tree's shade covered 2 graves. Mom's and Lucy's. I stood there and the thought hit me. At least they're together now. At least Mom's not alone. But then, a flicker. Something rust-colored between the graves. I blinked. Rusty. But no, not that thing, not the monster. This was him, our Rusty. His coat glowed like it used to, full and bright, brushed by spring sunlight. Strong, whole, alive, and so sad. Slow steps brought him to Lucy's grave. He lowered himself beside it, pressed his nose to the earth, and let out a soft, broken whimper. I turned to Dad and my heart stopped. His face, ashen, his lips tight, but his eyes, shining tears falling freely down his weathered cheeks. With a sudden, shattered breath, he dropped to his knees, arms wrapping Rusty close. And through the sobs, his voice cracked, raw and trembling.
I'm sorry. Oh, God.
I'm so sorry, buddy. You were trying to save her. You tried to take her sickness. And
His voice broke.
I tried to kill you. I was wrong.
Rusty pressed close, his body warm, his heart steady. Forgiving, because dogs, they forgive better than people ever do. Rusty stayed 15 more years, a lifetime of loyalty, a bond made whole again. And when his time came, I know he ran somewhere bright, somewhere warm, somewhere free. And there he found her, and together they ran. Because no darkness, no pain could ever reach them again.